Thanks for joining us here on Indivisible. I'm your host, John Stubbins, and we are thrilled to have you with us, America. Got a great show for you today, so we're going to get on to it. But first of all, go to johnstubbins.com where you can donate. You can get involved with our projects, our documentaries, one of which is American Anarchy, which goes over the entire Russia hoax dating to today. And you couldn't come up with a better title, American Anarchy. If you want to invest, you can also invest. Just send me an email. Again, go to johnstubbins.com where you can do that. You can also try our brand new coffee line, Pledge of Allegiance coffee line, where you can get amazing coffee. We choose only the best top crop beans in all of the world. So I think that you will find these bags of coffee interesting. You can get them ground, you can get them whole bean. We'll send them right to your door. General Flynn himself, right there, you can see holding our American Anarchy bag, and we're real proud to have him. That's John Ferguson standing next to him, and he does all of our blending and roasting and choosing of our beans from around the world to make sure that you coffee snobs get great coffee. And if you're like me, you're going to love great coffee, and that's all I drink. So let's get on with it. First of all, I want to discuss real quickly, because it's been nonstop in the news, and I'm sure you've seen it. We've got ICE struggling in different cities to get assistance. These are sanctuary cities, woke states a lot of the time, and we've had it. The American public voted for Donald J. Trump as president of the United States, and we want the illegals out. That's number one. So all these people that are interfering, we need to start putting them in jail. We need to start prosecuting them. And I don't mean anybody gets no deals. Nobody gets off scot-free anymore. The hammer's got to come down, and people need to learn that there are consequences for their actions. And right now, we're not seeing that, especially in these sanctuary cities where people are doing all kinds of things. With the guns firing, burning, throwing rocks, sticks, you name it. You know, last week we had the vehicle that was bumped into trying to corner in and block in ICE agents. This is absurd. It's not sustainable. This is not who we are. And it's time to either put up or shut up when it comes to law and order. We're either going to be a country that has law and order, or we're not. And if we're not, then everybody can play by the same rules. It's going to be the Wild West. But I've had it, and I know that a lot of other people have had it. So it's time to crack the hammer and no more nonsense. And by the way, this also applies because I know that President Trump has identified Antifa as a domestic terror organization. The same needs to happen with BLM. The exact same. They're doing a lot of damage in this country, and a lot of it's race-related and hate-related, and it needs to be dealt with, and it has to stop. People are getting hurt, killed, murdered, assaulted, and it's got to end. So no more deals, no more letting them walk free, no bail. If the feds need to come into these cities and make law and order happen, then so be it. Drive these people out. And by the way, the Southern Poverty Law Center, I was glad to see in the news, I think it was a week or two ago, that they've been excluded from the go-to list as far as this country goes. They have been a racist organization for a long time, and I'm glad to see that they're on their way out the door. Now, that being said, there is something else I wanted to talk about, and you're going to hear me talking about it a lot more over the coming weeks and months. The fiasco with MMTLP, which everybody should be familiar with, is ongoing, and I started investigating this about a month ago, and I've slowly been working my way into it because of the fact that we have 10 other investigations going on, including the Adam Schiff investigation, the Russia hoax, the border situation, obviously human trafficking, and so many other things, including big tech and Act Blue, which is high on my radar right now as well. So I want to read this to you. This came to me this morning. There was a new court filing that confirms that Schwab, TD Ameritrade, TradeStation, Thinkorswim, and NASDAQ have turned over Meta Materials stock trading data. The DTCC in discussions to turn over data for a fee. Citadel, Virtue, Anson Funds, and FINRA are lining up to argue motions to quash discovery. So I want you to keep that in mind, because that nonsense has to be dealt with. And that's a new investigation that we've taken on, and we're not going to let it go. We're going to get to the bottom of this. And of course, we know that President Trump is aware of the situation, but we need all of you to be aware of the situation. So Google TLP. Google MMTLP and inform yourselves, get some information on it so you know exactly what we're talking about here. It's not good, folks. Look, we're going to take a quick commercial break, and we'll be right back.
Here's to the overlooked, the overworked, the underappreciated. Here's to the fighters to preserve our freedom, our liberty, our rights, our faith. Here's to the workers, the farmers, the first responders, and those who serve so bravely in our military. Here's to Americans who proudly hold tight to our values: God, privacy, freedom of speech, life and liberty. Here's to the patriots who love this country and everything it stands for, who should never be canceled for believing in America and the blessings of liberty. Finally, there's a bank for you, Old Glory Bank, named after the flag that represents the fabric of this great country and the people of Old Glory Nation, the engine of America. Now you have a bank that values your values. Now you have a bank that stands with you, no matter where you stand. Old Glory Bank. We stand with you.
Member FDIC. Equal housing lender.
We've got a great show today. I've got an amazing guest. And before we get into this, I want to read an excerpt from his book. Let me just start here. Frank Meyer devised the blueprint for American conservatism, fusionism, championed by Barry Goldwater, Ronald Reagan, and so many to this day. Yet long before and far away, communists in London chanted, "Free Frank Meyer," to block the deportation of a comrade who was their cause célèbre. Those fervent Marxists could never have predicted that their hero would one day provide the intellectual energy necessary to propel conservatives to political power. The man who invented conservatism unveils one of the 20th century's great untold stories. A communist who turned conservative, an anti-war activist turned soldier, and a free love enthusiast turned family man, whose big idea captured the American right. This intellectual migration coincided with the clandestine affair inside 10 Downing Street. Service as a lieutenant to the man who later constructed the Berlin Wall, and neighborly chats with the pop star and poet celebrity next door. Present at the creation of National Review, Meyer helped launch Joan Didion's writing career. From H.G. Wells to Henry Kissinger to Milton Friedman, he rubbed shoulders with everyone who mattered. Having discovered Meyer's previously unexamined correspondence in an old soda warehouse, Daniel J. Flynn documents this saga in The Man Who Invented Conservatism, exposing the rivalries, jealousies, friendships, and fights that shaped the movement and what it means to be a conservative today. And I wanted to read that because I thought that that was so important to tell you. And I'm about 3/4 of the way done with this amazing book. And I got to tell you, folks, it's just incredible. Make sure that you go out and buy this book. And I'm going to be scrolling at the bottom of the screen so that you can go and check out Daniel J. Flynn. He works as a senior editor at the American Spectator. I want to bring onto the show now Daniel J. Flynn, who's an author, senior editor, as I said, at the American Spectator, visiting fellow at the Hoover Institution. He's authored 7 other books, including Blue Collar Intellectuals, When the Enlightened and the Everyman Elevated America, Conservative History of the American Left, Cult City on Jim Jones, Harvey Milk, and 10 Days That Shook San Francisco. How you doing, Daniel?
Outstanding. Thank you for having me.
Well, we're thrilled to have you. And look, I got to tell you, I've been so intrigued while reading this book. The deeper I get into it, the more I'm into it. I wish I had the ability and the time to be able to sit down and read it all the way through, but I just can't get it done. And so I'm getting it done piece by piece.
Well, it's a big book.
It is a big book, but it's great. And kudos to you for writing it. I think it's an amazing piece. The last book author that I had on that really moved me with his book was my friend James Rosen, White House chief correspondent for Newsmax, on his Anton Scalia book, which, by the way, he's working on part 2 of that book as we speak, but another fantastic book. So first of all, what made you write the book?
Well, there's a lot of people that like to write books about figures that have many books written about them, like Adolf Hitler or Winston Churchill or Abraham Lincoln or Julius Caesar. I would rather write a book about someone where there's not a lot written about, someone that we should know about but don't. And I think Frank Meyer fits into that category. When he was on with Mike Wallace in 1961, Wallace said, I would venture to guess that maybe 1 in 1,000 of my viewers knows who you are, but I'm told that William F. Buckley hangs on your editorial advice and Barry Goldwater solicits you for political advice. Tell me, who is Frank Meyer? I think if 1 of 1,000 of Mike Wallace's viewers knew who Frank Meyer was in 1961, the situation is probably a little bit more desperate now. Maybe it's like 1 in 10,000. But I think for anyone who does pick up the book, they realize very quickly why it is they should know about Frank Meyer, and also why it is that we don't know about Frank Meyer. Because on the left, there was a concerted effort amongst the communists to bury his history. We know this because their phones were tapped. We had British intelligence listening in on their conversations. And when Frank Meyer turned on the communists, here they were saying, what are we going to do about our history? And they are caught dead to rights saying, well, we need to rewrite the history. We need to rewrite the history of the students' movement. What they meant by that was Frank was the Johnny Appleseed of communism in Great Britain. That all went down. It all got thrown down the memory hole. And on the conservative side of things, unfortunately, Frank's papers were lost in a warehouse for many years. And it took me several years, but I found them. And so on the one side, on the liberal side, the left-wing side, they actively suppressed, they actively censored his history. On the conservative side, it was more like neglect. And it took me a few years, but finally I found this treasure trove in Altoona, Pennsylvania, which is about a 250,000 documents, Frank Meyer's life papers. And it really tells an extraordinary story.
Yeah, what's interesting to me is I love the Johnny Appleseed comparison, by the way. Great comparison. Gosh, I remember when I was a kid, we used to watch Johnny Appleseed, the Disney version of the cartoon in school, right? And it was so good. It taught so many kids just wonderful stories back then. Disney has ruined that, haven't they? This reads to me, and it's probably one of the reasons I'm so intrigued by it, is number one, I'm a World War II aficionado. I study World War II history like crazy, and I can't get enough of it because of so many of the mistakes that we're repeating, right? The tendency of history repeating itself. And we see a lot of that in some of the references made in your book. Almost reads, you kind of referred to it, similar to a spy novel,
Well, parts of it are that. I mean, Frank wasn't himself a spy, but he was in the above ground party. However, his activities were almost spy-like, and you had spies following him around. I mean, there's 160 pages of MI5 and MI6 surveillance on Frank Meyer that I was able to obtain for the book. And they, as they're following him around, they could tell you what tweed coat he was wearing, what bars he was drinking at, where his mother did her banking at. The one thing they kept out of their reports was at the very time they were watching Frank Meyer, who was the leader of the Communist Student Bureau in Great Britain, he was having an affair with Ramsay MacDonald's youngest daughter. In other words, Ramsay MacDonald being the Prime Minister of Great Britain, Frank Meyer was, in fact, going into 10 Downing Street when he wasn't there and was messing around with his daughter.
Wow.
So if you want to take any figure in the history of communism, Che Guevara or Jack Reed, any sort of romantic figure, none of them had the guts to pull off something like that. But Frank Meyer did that. And as he was doing it, probably what would surprise you or your viewers, that there were deportation proceedings taken up against him, and very quickly he was deported from the country. I have a letter from Sheila MacDonald, the Prime Minister's daughter, saying, "Listen, is there anything I can do, Frank?" And I'm sitting there reading it, laughing, saying, there's certainly nothing she could do. In fact, what she did probably helped get him deported from Great Britain.
Well, folks, again, the book by Daniel J. Flynn, The Man Who Invented Conservatism, The Unlikely Life of Frank S. Meyer. I find it so fascinating. How old was Frank when he died,
He was 62, and he was someone, what he was associated with his whole life. Two things. One was the telephone. He had telephone bills that went up to about a quarter of his income because he was calling everyone. The other thing was the lit cigarette. Frank, like a lot of guys in those days, was a chain smoker. And some of these guys were really living kind of madmen existences.
Sure, yeah. And that was back in the days before they started contaminating the cigarettes. So my guy on that have to be Humphrey Bogart.
Yeah, and I guess Humphrey Bogart probably smoked a few more because I think he
sure
died
did.
70, something like that.
Yeah, no, there's a rich history there. It's I find it fascinating, and it is a big book. Look, there's no doubt about it, but it's a great read, and it reads smooth and easy. And before you know it, you're done with half the book. When I first started, I got through probably a quarter of it, and then the next time I sat down, probably about half of a quarter, and then the third time I got through almost half. So it's definitely a phenomenal book, and like I said, it's people like you that write these guys. And by the way, and I was just looking over some of the books that you've written. I haven't read Cult City on Jim Jones, but I'm sure that's got to be fascinating as well. Jim Jones, that guy, wow,
Well, it's funny, Jim Jones had a cult, and in a big way, Frank Meyer belonged to a political cult, which was the Communist Party. And it wasn't until, you bring up World War II earlier, it wasn't until he became a soldier and started training. He started meeting the plumbers and bricklayers and industrial workers, and he thought, these were not the proletariat that Marx had described. He started to have second thoughts. That culminates with him leaving the Communist Party in 1945, And he testifies that the longest, most expensive trial in U.S. history at that point, which is the Smith Act trial in 1949, sends his former comrades to jail, including people like Gus Hall and Eugene Dennis, the leaders of the Communist Party. And at that point, he felt like he was a marked man, got a firearm, started staying up all night, which is sort of the third thing a lot of people remember about Frank Meyer, is he kept these eccentric hours. He stayed up all night. And that started because I think, he had a legitimate fear of whether the communists might have some retribution towards him.
Well, of course. Who wouldn't? You'd be looking over your shoulder all the time, right? I mean, hey, you're burning the candle at both ends at that point, aren't you?
Yes, yes, you are. And in Woodstock, of course, even before, it had all the connotations. I mean, this is a very left-wing place. There are active communists up there. And so Frank sort of had to start anew up there. And the way he did it, like I said, is with the telephone.
Wow. Folks, like I said, this is an amazing read. You definitely want to get it. And we're going to take a quick commercial break, and we'll be right back with an amazing author, Daniel J. Flynn.
Hunter Nation is the ultimate we the people in the conservation community, holding our elected employees accountable to the hunting, fishing, trapping, freedom lifestyle that has brought wildlife back to the healthiest and most thriving condition in our lifetime. HunterNation.org is the epicenter for freedom and wildlife conservation in America. I am Hunter Nation.
He was a victim of the unlawful crime.
If you don't trust them, you think they'll be
greatest civil rights violations in American history.
Their investigation.
A window into the Trump campaign.
Unfortunately, it can happen to anyone.
We're back with Daniel J. Flynn. Daniel, I'll take a look at something else, and we can get back to the book here before we expire, but I definitely want to get to this while I have the chance. I want to talk about this op-ed that you wrote. This came out yesterday, right?
Correct.
The exclusive Daniel Flynn, Frank Meyer, and the Roots of Trump's America First Foreign Policy. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. In 1968, Henry Kissinger was selected by Richard Nixon to be his national security advisor in his incoming administration. He knew Frank Meyer, reached out to him and said, what should our foreign policy be? And Frank, at the time, he's an anti-communist bar none since he had left the Communist Party. But he said, listen, if there were no such thing as the Soviet Union, the whole idea of the Vietnam War, the idea of foreign aid, the idea of United Nations, the idea of these entangling alliances, all of this would be a complete farce if it were not for the Soviet Union. In other words, if it were not for this messianic state seeking world domination that was an existential threat to not only ourselves, but to many of our allies, all of this would be a farce. So the day that the Soviet Union goes away, our foreign policy should be something that is more restrained by what America's just interests are. And that was Frank's belief going back to the Sharon Statement. One of his acolytes, Stan Evans, wrote the Young Americans for Freedom Sharon Statement. And therein, he said, our foreign policy should be, restrained by what is in America's just interests. And I think that's been a pretty good, guidepost to go by since then. But obviously, up until very recently, I don't think too many of our presidents have taken that as a compass.
It's really interesting because it's amazing how the timing of that op-ed goes along with your book. But thank God that you did it, and I'm intrigued by your work. I'd love to talk to you even more about this because it really looks to me like, when you look at, first of all, just to most conservatives, the idea of going full-blown communist and becoming a conservative, the likelihood is like nil, right? Especially in today's space, as you're laughing and I'm laughing, it's real. It's okay. I liken it to Islamic jihad because you cannot reason with evil. and someone that wants to kill you, someone that believes in their heart and their mind and their soul that beheading you is the only way forward, and there's nothing to discuss. You can't negotiate with that, okay? And these communists, these Marxists, these people that want to destroy our republic right now, that are out there trying to do it, trying to create it, whether it's the CCP or Islamic Jihad or BLM, Antifa, the cartels. Look, to me, they've all gathered together as the new axis of evil, and they're working together to try to burn it down. I mean, they say so. They don't hide it.
Yeah.
So what are we to do if we know that's how they feel and that's what they want and that's what they're going to do? You're not going to bargain with them. And this is the thing that scares me. I understand it. I'm a military veteran. I get it. I know you get it. But to the average American out there that has a family that works, that doesn't have time to keep up with all of this and the intricacies of it, they don't understand that if you're face to face with one of these individuals, they will kill you. And we're seeing it all over the place in these woke cities, in these sanctuary cities. People are dying in America, innocent civilians.
I think with regard to Frank, just to put an optimistic spin on this, people would have said what you're saying about Frank Meyer in his day, but yet, one day he reads The Road to Serfdom by Friedrich Hayek, and he has an epiphany, and he thinks, gee, the last 14 years of my life have been a waste. I've been wrong. And what I would suggest is that at some point, there's going to be someone, let's say an Antifa person, who realizes, oh, gee, what if I was wrong? I mean, it sounds crazy to contemplate, but some of these people, there's gonna be epiphanies coming, and that epiphany came for Frank Meyer, and what he did was absolutely remarkable after that. I mean, he's one of the founders of the American Conservative Union, the Philadelphia Society. He's president at the creation of National Review, the Conservative Party of New York, Young Americans for Freedom. He comes up with this idea of fusionism, where he basically says that tradition and freedom are not in conflict, they're in cooperation. You take away thousands of years of Western civilization tradition, and freedom's going to go with it. That was his big idea, and that was what was left behind in 10 years after his death, about when Reagan gives a speech at the Conservative Political Action Conference. He starts talking about all of the conservative figures that had influence on him, and he stops for an awfully long time on Frank Meyer, because Frank Meyer's conservatism was rooted in the American soil. In other words, if you're a conservative in Great Britain, maybe you're conserving the monarchy, maybe you're conserving the aristocracy. In the United States, what is our tradition? What is our tradition that a conservative would conserve? Well, that's the founding. And whether you're talking about the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution or the Federalist Papers, it all means freedom. And so if you're a conservative in this country, according to Frank Meyer, the tradition that you're going to conserve is freedom. And I think that is something that gets overlooked, I think, by a lot of conservatives today, but it's something that's never going to go away. As long as there's an America, and as long as there's such people as conservatives, they're going to think, what is it that we as Americans, what's unique to us, what's special to us that we're going to conserve? And that's the American founding.
Amen. Amen. Folks, again, the book is The Man Who Invented Conservatism, The Unlikely Life of Frank S. Meyer, authored by Daniel J. Flynn, who's been with us. And we're grateful that you took the time to come on the show, brother. That's a good way to end it, because you're absolutely right. You nail it right on the head. And I hope that we can get this mess straightened around, because there's a lot of us out here that are waiting on the worst to happen, and we're ready. We don't want it to have to go there, but again, you're dealing with people that you cannot that you cannot bargain with. You can't negotiate. There is no negotiation as far as they're concerned, right? So when you're dealing with someone like that, that's the kind of enemy that you need to square up, buddy. And you better you better have eyes in the back of your head. You better have backup, because if it comes to that, number one, the country is already in peril right now. I mean, we're walking on thin ice. So God bless you.
I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, our pleasure. Hope you'll come back again. What's next? What's next on the agenda?
Well, I'm going to be promoting this book for a while, but I have a number of speeches and a number of articles. I have an article out today in the New York Post about Meyer's correspondence with Steve Allen. Steve Allen was the original host of The Tonight Show.
Yes.
The father of late night television. And instead of being like Jimmy Kimmel, Steve Allen, who was a man of the left, went to Bill Buckley, went to Frank Meyer, went to Barry Goldwater and said, listen, how are we going to, take care of these extremists on both ends and get them to be more responsible. In other words, he wanted to work with them. He didn't do what Jimmy Kimmel did. And the whole point of the article is that Kimmel, both in terms of comedy, but also in terms of his political activism, would have a lot to learn from a guy like Steve Allen.
Amen to that. Amen to that. God bless you, Daniel. What a great show. We're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back. Big news, America. Mike is bringing back the pillow offer for just $29.98. They're the softest pillows. They don't go flat. Wash them and dry them as many times as you like, and they still keep their shape. And they're made in America. Mike is offering his premium My Pillows at his lowest price ever. Queen size for $29.98, regularly $69.98. That's a $40 savings. And king size, only $5 more. Go to mypillow.com and enter the promo code INDIVISIBLE for my show, or call 1-800-716-4639 and give them the code INDIVISIBLE for my show, and you're going to get huge savings.
Every day they put their lives on the line, in the line of duty, in the line of fire. They're protectors, our armed forces, police, firefighters, and Border Patrol agents. They protect us, so Old Glory Bank is protecting them with Old Glory Protect. It's a $100,000 line of duty death benefit free with an Old Glory Bank account with direct deposit. At Old Glory Bank, we protect those who protect you. Open an account today at oldglorybank.com. We stand with you.
Thanks for joining us, America. Great show. Hug your loved ones tonight. Let them know how much you love them and how much you care. And spread the word about patriotism, about a love for America and our republic, and how you want to save it so that we can save being free. God bless you. God bless your families, and God bless America. We'll see you next time.